The Nashville Scene is running their annual Best of Nashville Awards, and we need your help to win Best Podcast. Visit www.bestofnashville2021.com. One more time, www.bestofnashville2021.com to cast your ballot now through September 6th. Just click on the Media and Politics category, find Best Podcast, and write in Pitch List. Thanks, everybody. Hey, everybody. Chris Lindsay here, and you're listening to Pitch List. Join us on a deep dive into the heart of what makes writing songs and making music so magical. Let's find out what makes songwriters tick, and along the way, remember why we love music. Welcome to Pitch List.
Hey everybody, I'm Dana, the producer of Pitch List, and with Chris out of town this week, I am super excited to introduce his chat with today's guest. Since his debut in 2013, this artist, writer, musician has established himself as one of Nashville's most beloved and well-respected artists. In addition to his own music, he's played in Vince Gill's band, gotten cuts and played on records for Dierks Bentley, Eric Church, Luke Combs, Kacey Musgraves, and many more. But besides being incredibly talented, he's just a super down-to-earth guy and has a lot of wisdom to share. He and Chris have an honest chat about leaning into what matters most in life, and ultimately letting that bleed into and become what your art is all about. He has a fantastic new EP called Sugarcane out now, so without any further ado, here's Chris's talk with Charlie Worsham.
Good morning. It's a beautiful morning here in Nashville. We've got a really great guest for us today, an incredible musician, writer, artist, Charlie Worsham. Hey, Charlie, how are you, man?
Chris, oh, man, I'm loving this day. I'm loving my life right now. It's good to be on with you.
Well, thank you for taking your time or letting us have a little bit of your time. I was working on my questions this morning and a little off topic, but I wanted to mention it. I think I first became aware of you a few years back from Tom Bukovac. Are you know Tom well, right?
I do. He's one of my favorite people.
Yeah, he...
and as a matter of fact, homeschooling helped get me through the pandemic. It was Leslie Jordan's Instagram and Book's YouTube post that got us through.
I agree 100%, man. And Tom walked in one day. We were working on something out here, and he walked in. He's like, "Hey, have you heard this Charlie Worsham kid?" And I was like, "No." He's like, "He's incredible." And and I remember diving right in and finding some stuff. Not as easy to find stuff back then as it is now, because I think this was probably 2013, 14. So I've followed you for a long time, man. You're an incredible, like I said, musician and artist. Let's start out with this, because here's some things I learned about you that I didn't know. So you went to Berkeley in Boston, is that right?
I did. I spent 2.5 years there and moved to Nashville with basically all my people. I mean, I was one of a couple dozen folks who just happened to be in the Berkeley community from all places around the globe and had intentions on making a beeline for Nashville around the same time. I split a Penske truck with my drummer buddy, Steve Sinatra, and we drove down. We booked ourselves a gig at the Kennedy Center, this thing called the Millennium Stage. They put a show on every day. Our buddy Matt flew in because he had already gone from Berkeley to Atlanta and was playing music in Atlanta. He flew up, met us there. We played the gig, drove the rest of the way. We had a flat tire. Landed on Villa Place, where I moved into the Nashville version of Animal House with my new bandmates at the time in King Billy, and proceeded to get my master's in education, so to speak, those first couple years in Nashville.
That's awesome. I definitely want to talk about, it's King Billy, right?
That's the band, yeah.
Yeah,
so that was
but let's back up, because I'm curious. What was your main instrument at Berkeley? Because I think you are a multi-instrumental guy.
Yeah.
But what was your main study of, your focus there?
I somehow have always been a utility musician. Part of it is the blessing in disguise of me wanting a guitar so that I could be Keith Richards, and my mom fearing that I would get long hair and tattoos and live that life or whatever, but always supporting me. So she's like, well, how about a banjo? And we went to Opryland. I saw Mike Snyder play. I was like, oh,
that's funny.
Heck yeah, man. Bring me aboard the banjo train. But then it was music instead of sports or soccer and then baseball. It was all right, banjo. Ooh, could I get a mandolin? I want to learn to play mandolin because now I'm kind of a bluegrass kid, and I picked up fiddle for a little while. Though the world is better off with me not playing fiddle. And I eventually got around to guitar. So fast forward from those years that sort of shaped me to being at Berklee, I was the kid who arrived from Mississippi with a Stratocaster and a Martin D28. And a fiddle and a mandolin and a banjo. And on paper, I was guitar. And on paper, I was music production and engineering major. But that's really code for, I think guitar will allow me to just be in the center here, but indulge other things like voice lessons, private voice lessons from Donna McElroy, who actually had sung on a bunch of records I grew up listening to as a session harmony singer for like Patti Loveless, everybody. She taught me how to breathe as a singer and gave me my first massive leg up as a singer. That happened at Berklee. My guitar teacher, Scotty Johnson up there, I loved it because there were some labs. I signed up for a couple of guitar labs, and I remember the one that I had signed up for was like something rock, like pop rock. And day one, we were supposed to go home with the solo from Crossroads, the Clapton version, and then come back and play it. Well, I'd played that solo my whole life, and I come back the next week, and he's like, your picking pattern is wrong. I was like, peace. That's not how I play guitar, dude. Like, I'm not here to learn jazz chords that take half the page to write. Like, all due respect to that, but like, I still want a G run to kind of get me going. I want Lester Flatt's rhythm playing to like make me sweat a little bit still. And so I was also playing banjo in my ensemble class or whatever. So I was in the bluegrass band at Berklee. So I bounced around a lot, and the production and engineering, what I mean there in terms of it being code for something, I wanted keys to the studios, man, because they would wrap the classes. It's like 7:00 or so at night in those studios, but you could sign up for practice time. So I would sign up for, the midnight to 4 a.m. block, and you go to the Dunkin' across the street, get a jug of coffee, and just stay up all night and record. Because, my God, man, there's an SSL in there and Neumann's. And so that, to me, was the essence of my Berklee time. And I was in those rooms at 4 a.m. with Eric Massey and Matty Diaz and all of these folks that I've known since. And still, I mean, gosh, Maddie's singing on my record. This is the first time with Sugarcane, this new EP, that I didn't make my record with Eric Massey. But he's one of my best friends and one of my favorite producers and engineers in town. And we got a lot more records to make together over the years to come. So Berklee was a hothouse, man. You know what I mean? It was like, let's get these little seedlings good and healthy, and then send them out to the great outdoors of Music City.
That's awesome. That's a great story. And all of you came here to town and have done really well.
We've all found our way.
Yeah.
I mean, there's what was 24 people is maybe less than a dozen, somewhere, between half a dozen and a dozen. But everybody found their way. And music still plays a role in our lives, just not for all of us still here in Nashville. But I've got that sort of like the chip, right? Like, oh man, you're still here after 10 years, and I'm about to get my chip at the end of this month for being here 15 years, and those friendships get richer with time.
Absolutely, they do. Well, let's talk about your let's go back even further. Your early influence. It sounded like you did listen to some country, and you grew up in Mississippi, so you definitely had to have some R&B, some blues. But tell us about who you liked and who you think sort of formed your musicality as a kid.
Absolutely. It was a religious almost requirement to watch the CMAs and the ACMs on TV. I was never in need of being pushed to do that. I was cross-legged on the floor, glued to the TV. And I lived for moments like Alan Jackson walking off when they didn't give George Jones a full, he was going to do like a verse and chorus of choices. Like, come on, man, that's the possum. And I loved it. And I loved when Vince Gill sang The Key to Life on that stage, just him and a guitar. And my dad and I would try to pick who was lip syncing and who was playing live. And so that was one channel where I was, taking input. The radio, my hometown station, B100, is your typical country music station. And I would get a kick out of Joe Diffie, the Telecasters on the Joe Diffie songs, man. Pickup Man, I thought the lyrics were fun. And that was an influence. That was something coming in to my heart and through my ears into my heart. My dad, who was in high school when the Beatles played Ed Sullivan and promptly got the same drum kit as Ringo, who took me to my first rock concert. I sing about it in my song, Hang On to That. The Pyramid in Memphis, which is now the world's largest Bass Pro Shop. It was Johnny Lang opening for the Stones. And, we were really kind of there to see Charlie Watts and Keith Richards. I mean, Mick Jagger blew us away too. It's like, how does this guy not stop moving? But it was this seminal experience for me. And the Beatles records, and my parents had a stack of Vince Gill records and George Strait records. I remember counting all their CDs once, and I was like, the two people they have basically the entire discography of are George Strait and Vince Gill. And so those CDs were playing on car trips, and especially trips up to Nashville. I specifically remember the Keith Whitley Greatest Hits that ends with his sort of work tape of Tell Lori I Love Her. That was a channel I was tuning into, and with that specifically, it was the first time I kind of connected like the real life heartache connection with country and how life and art can sort of overlap. But there was also the Mississippi Delta 20 miles west of me. And BB, when I finally got an electric guitar, it was BB King who was my first teacher. It was his records, because you'd hear it and go, well, I can play that. And then you try to bend a note like BB. I mean, when you hear my song Sugarcane and I'm playing the 335, I'm trying to be BB, with all these other overlaps. And a lot of the other songs on the EP, I'm trying to be Steve Gaines. I was a huge Skynyrd fan. Skynyrd's one of my all-time favorites. And later, I got to really understand that all these records I loved, these really funky records, were made in Memphis at Stax or over at Muscle Shoals. And so I developed over time and continue to develop over time an appreciation of this sense of place growing up in Mississippi. I have to say that my North Star has always been Vince Gill. And we went to see him in concert probably 10 times.
Wow. Wow.
And he continues to be someone I call. And he's one of my first calls when I need advice. And the craziest part of that being, I would stand up, and watch that concert from whatever seat we were at in the venue, and dream of either being Vince in the spotlight or being one of those people on stage. Because with Vince and my father sitting next to me, it wasn't just, man, that's Vince. It's like, that's a Fender Stratocaster. That Telecaster is his number one guitar. He and then it was like, that's John Huey on steel guitar, and all these. And then fast forward to 2019, I'm playing in Vince's band, and I'm like hearing these stories, but from the mouth of my hero and the bandmates. It's a pretty wild thing,
Yeah, that had to be a full circle moment for you to play
Absolutely.
with Vince Gill. Is your father still with us? Did he get to go see you do that?
He is still with us.
Awesome.
It's crazy. My dad has hung with Vince a good bit now, at the Opry dressing rooms or out on the road. My parents have come to see me play with him. And because I have to tell you, on this Zoom screen talking to you, the drum kit behind me, that's my dad's drum kit.
Wow.
He sold the Ringo kit, but he got this old Rogers kit, which is killer. And that's my first memory of music, is sitting in his lap, banging on the drums, And I have to also credit my mom, because she drove me to banjo lessons. And I didn't mention this, but the other two influences were the bands I played in. And being a bluegrass kid, it was Jimmy Martin, man. That just got me going. And Marty Stewart, and knowing that he was a bluegrasser, in addition to being the guy playing Tempted on the radio. And in high school, I was in a bar band. We played top 40. I mean, we play Huey Lewis and the News, and then we played Weezer Hash Pipe next, And that was the first time I started singing in public, really.
Fantastic. And so let's talk about this. So you moved to Nashville. You're coming out of, now you are recording at Berklee, and I'm sure you're recording stuff you wrote. Did you immediately jump into the writing pool when you moved to Nashville? Talk to us about that. Had you been writing on your own? Was collaborating new to you? How did that all work for you, and what did you think?
I didn't know it at the time, but what got me started being a songwriter was coming to Nashville at age 13 and making a bluegrass record. I had just played on the Opry and had been introduced to the guys in Mike Snyder's band. It was Charlie Cushman and Bobby Clark. Blake Williams was the bass player. Brian Sutton, Uncle Josh Graves, Bobby Hicks, and me making a record in Bobby's house on a 2-inch tape machine, and I'm sitting there in between the songs hearing Josh Graves tell stories about Flatt and Scruggs days. And that was thanks to my mom. She was sort of like, hey, you're taking this seriously, and as long as you are, like, why don't you make a record? And so I saw that 2-inch tape machine, and I got the fever for recording gear. And it just so happened a few years later, I was introduced to Norbert Putnam, who had married a Grenada girl and had set up shop with a Mackie digital console and 24-track recorder, and took me under his wing, taught me a lot, hipped me to some good cheap mics, and basically when he got tired of whatever rig he had, he sold me his rig for next to nothing.
Wow.
And so there I was, a high school kid playing in bars on the weekend, only job I've ever had, and is a really good job in high school. I even spotted my biology teacher once in the bar, and I think she was mortified. But I was recording then on weeknights and stuff at the house, and what got me writing songs, I ran out of material. I got to write songs. So I made a record in the backyard, basically, on that gear that Norbert allowed me to acquire. And on that record were my first efforts as a songwriter. It's worth mentioning the first two songs were Come to Trish's Barbershop and Cross Country Seed, which I sold each one for like $150 to some local businesses and heard them on B100 on the radio station. So when I moved to Berklee, or to Boston to go to Berklee, one of those interests that wasn't on paper for me but was something important was getting in the songwriting classes, and I really started to take songwriting seriously. And so I moved to Nashville early because of this. I'd been making trips to Nashville to get to know writers and players, stumbled into some buddies that I'd even met like when we were 11 playing in a bluegrass jam. And they were like, we're in this band King Billy, and this guy just dropped out. Do you want to be in the band? We got a publishing deal. So I moved to Nashville right around turning 21, joined a band, signed a pub deal, and now I'm writing in co-writes. And so it was a real natural progression. Just I fell into it by accident the whole way.
Wow. That's a crazy story. Now, I've seen some names, I think. Tell us who was in King Billy.
So lead singer Donnie Fallgater, drummer Kevin Weaver, bass player Matt Utterback, who was the same bass player I mentioned that was living in Atlanta. And my buddy Steve and I were like, dude, we're driving to Nashville, fly up to DC and play a gig with us. And me and Matt and Steve had a little group on the side for fun. And we convinced Matt, when another member of King Billy had left, like, hey, we need a bass player. The dining room in our band house is open. We can cover up the doors and you can live there for $300 a month, And he moved and he lived in the house and joined the band. And then across the street from that house were John and TJ Osborne, and John was in the band playing guitar. And
wow.
TJ was around. He was driving the tractor trailer for Phil Vassar.
Wow.
But on the down low, he was writing songs and singing the fire out of them because we'd have these jam sessions late at night. And it was just, oh my gosh, dude, like your voice. And eventually, they figured out they were the brothers Osborne. And I have some really fun recordings because I always kept my rig. and did some work tapes for them. And I don't even think they knew it at the time, but it was like, y'all are a duo. But then to round out the band, a guy named Josh Matheny, who's a ridiculously talented dobro player, lap steel player, bluegrasser. He was my buddy I'd met at a bluegrass jam. That was my entryway. He picked me up my first time landing at B&A and drove me around and introduced me to folks. And he's a great singer and songwriter too. But everybody's here doing something. Wow. And
at what point in all this did you decide that, or maybe you always knew that you wanted to be a solo artist?
I think that I've always deep down had it. I don't think I ever went without it. But, I didn't sing until I was in this bar band, and we'd have to do 4 sets a night, and so I kind of sang out of necessity. I didn't write until I ran out of songs to record, so I started writing out of necessity. Then I fell in love with those things, and I was still figuring that out for myself when I joined the band. But deep down, I knew in the core of my being, like I want to be the star. And there was actually a song that we recorded on this album that King Billy did with Chuck Ainley, actually. And there was a song I had co-written, and I sing high, and it was we had recorded it a step too high. And I kept telling the producers, like, dude, just let me sing it. And he's like, you're the utility harmony singer guy. Yeah, I got him for the, and gotten a little spat there. But I don't know that I would have made the leap had fate not intervened. And how fate intervened was the band was up for a pub renegotiation, and some things had kind of gone down with one of the people in our core team, our producer dude, and it wasn't sitting right with me, and I wanted to stay with the band, but I didn't want to sign that document because I also took a music business course at Berkeley, and it's like, hey man, if the band breaks up and they like you and they want you, they can still hold you for 4 more years as a solo writer. It's collectively and individually is a real phrase. And I didn't want to potentially, when I saw things happening in the band that it wasn't the band, it was outside of the band, surrounding the band, that I didn't necessarily agree with. I didn't want to potentially lock myself in. And so I was like, I want to be in the band, but I can't sign this pub deal. But I had to be in the pub deal to stay in the band. And it wasn't a bad pub deal or anything. It didn't sit right with me. And so I kind of got pushed off that cliff ledge. And there I was. I moved back in to my parents had bought a condo down in Whitebridge, and my mom had taken a job teaching in Williamson County. I moved in with my mom, and I called Tom Bukovac and said, man, I really need to play sessions to get some money so I can pay some rent, so I can, do this thing and move out from my mom. I meet Arturo Buenajora. A few months later, I'd signed a pub deal with him. And Book was good to his word. He helped me out, got me on some sessions. And at the time, he threw me in some rooms that I maybe wasn't quite ready for, and in a very graceful way would pull me aside and be like, hey man, don't you think that guitar is ready for new strings? You want to check your tuning? You maybe get a different tuner. That Boss tuner you can throw in the lake, And so he helped me earn my wings as a session player.
Well, I'm not surprised. He's such a great guy. So he brought you in on sessions that he was already on.
That's right. And in doing so, introduced me to the community, and more calls came.
That's a great story. So I want to kind of go back. I'm sure it was bittersweet, maybe not even bittersweet. It was difficult for you to turn that deal down, although in your heart it wasn't right. But you didn't have another deal to go to, but you jumped off anyway, and it ended up opening you up. It opened you up for Arthur to sign you. That's and right. Then probably take off your whole career. And it started out looking dicey, right?
Well, I mean, yeah, when you're, out there doing your thing, you come home from a session, or you go meet up with a buddy at the bar, and like you walk in the door and there you're living with your mom. It's not I would, because the band lived right one block from Music Row, and I would go for runs up and down Music Row, and I would daydream. I was like, I'm going to buy that building. I'm going to own that building when I get my 10th number one. I'd practice my acceptance speech for the CMA Entertainer of the Year. And because you kind of have to have a little bit of that mindset, I think, to stand in the arena,
They call it it's visualization.
It's visualization.
Olympic athletes use it, high performing, anyone trying to do, like a high performance career, visualization is like incredible. I mean, it is a great tool.
It's a critical part of surviving and thriving in our world. So it was a little bit tough at that moment to stand in the bathroom mirror and be like, I'm gonna, because I thought by 24 I would have all these hits. What I really thought was going to happen was King Billy was going to explode, be this massive band. I would start making solo records on the side, and then that would take off. And by 35, I'd would have been a part of the greatest band in country music history, and then had my own crazy successful solo career. And it didn't happen that way, but thank God it didn't, because I had a lot left to learn to be ready for standing in that arena, which I'm still standing in. And to me, shoot, man, that's half the battle.
I agree. I think it's more than half the battle. I say it all the time. It's like, as long as you're still standing, you're still fighting, you can win. It only takes one hit. For a writer like me, it takes one hit. For an artist like you, one big hit and you're off and running. I mean, it's that close at all times,
That's right. And when you write that song, you've printed a lottery ticket, and that ticket might not cash itself in for 7 years, like House That Built Me.
Yep.
Or you might be Don Schlitz, and it might cash itself in twice with, The Gambler. I learned this, and it blew my mind, but it had been recorded by Bobby Bare and by Johnny Cash, and
Wow.
Nothing happened. And it's a sort of famous story now. You probably know it.
I don't know that I've heard it.
Well, Don Schlitz, I
Yep.
think one person in town would take meetings with him at this point, and to pay the bills, he was working the overnight shift at the Vanderbilt Computer Lab when the computers took up whole rooms. But he was writing songs during the day, and he was tired. He wasn't getting much sleep, so he kept falling asleep on the job. And he got this letter from his boss at Vanderbilt saying, "Man, if you fall asleep one more time, you're fired." And right around that same time, his phone rang and said, "Man, Kenny Rogers has cut The Gambler," after it had been cut twice by two massive country music stars, both Hall of Famers. And then his world changed. Like you said, man, it only takes that one. And so I'm a far sight better than getting fired from the overnight computer lab shift at Vanderbilt. And had I had that hit right out of the gate,
Mm-hmm.
I would not have had the past 10 years of mental health, counseling from Porter's Call, this great organization in town that offers free counseling to recording artists. And probably wouldn't have met my wife, probably wouldn't get to be a dad, and much less be a dad that gets to be around for these precious early years, early days with my son. And I wouldn't have had the chance to play on all these records and go on all these tours and be in Vince's band, be in Old Crow for a year, and not just have that experience, but glean the wisdom from that experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I'm just now ready to have a hit.
Wow.
It's like, because having a hit is you're getting handed keys to a Maserati, and it's like, dude, you should probably drive a Camry for a few years before you crank that bad boy up.
What a great metaphor. It's true. And you and I could probably list, we won't do it, names of people who came to town and really, fired off a couple of hits quick. And it's devastating. I've seen it happen a couple of times where then all of a sudden people aren't cutting their songs and they're mad about it, and they get ugly with people about it. They started driving that Maserati right away, and then pretty quick they were crashing it and not knowing it.
Yes. Success is as stressful as failure.
Oh, yeah. Don't go away. Pitch List will be right back after the break. Hey, Pitch List listeners. We are so excited to announce our new summer song contest. You have until August 31st to post an original song to your Instagram feed for the chance to win your very own interview on an episode of Pitch List, plus some official merchandise and some one-on-one song feedback from Chris. That's me. All the details and rules are on our website and our social media platforms. So enter today.
You know, I witnessed that because I was going to say, man, it can make you want to put your fist through this town to quote my own song. But, you know, where that song of mine comes from is seeing up close all of that. In 2014, I was stuck between a 15-minute Sam Hunt set and a Kip Moore headlining set, and I had 45 minutes on stage. And believe you me, and you and I can relate to this, it's like I'd much rather play 45 minutes than 15 minutes. There's nothing for a player more aggravating than waiting all day to get on that stage and you only get like 3-4 songs. Like, give me a break, man. But we booked the tour at a time when I was launching my second single. Sam was launching his first. And in the interim, I mean, we're talking 6 months, 9 months maybe, my record died, he blew up, and the arrangement for the tour stayed the same. And that was hard for me. That was hard for Sam. It was probably hard for Kip. It was certainly hard for the audience every night because they didn't know that all of this had been arranged before. And nobody knows when you book a tour that sometimes happens. And yeah, I felt bad for myself, and I got really angry in that season of life. But looking back, I think it was probably equally difficult for Sam. Here he is, Elvis, and he gets 15 minutes a night. And here are the fans going, who is this Yahoo? You know, we want Sam Hunt. Like, we bought this ticket to see Sam and Kip. I don't know who Charlie is. And that taught me so much going through that. And now looking back on it and realizing, like, okay.
That's so interesting. I have never heard a story like that. So I guess, and I'm sure everyone listening would also, I'm assuming they would have adjusted your lineup based on what was happening with Sam. I mean, he had an amazing, he took off like a rocket, you know? And it seems
Right.
like, why would they not? I mean, I'm not making a judgment, but it seems like, you know, it probably even, like you said, it probably even put pressure on Kip, you know,
It was a strange thing for everyone involved, and I don't think we'll ever know why. It may have honestly been so close to the tour happening, and so much was moving pieces were in place. I'm sure contracts had been signed.
okay.
It stayed the way it was. But again, it goes back to every night, the fans had no way of knowing that. And looking back, as much as I want to play 45 minutes, I probably could have won a lot more fans had I been the first guy.
Right.
So I'm like, oh, who's this? Oh, cool. You know, but I'm still looking forward. But I felt like the fans thought it was me taking Sam from them, you know.
Oh.
And that wasn't fair to them. But it didn't stop me from taking it out on myself and my band and them. And it was a low point for me. And it was when all of the Porter's Call and counseling started to really kick in. It got me to where I went to on-site a year or two after that, and gained some perspective and some gratitude. And I mean, look, when I signed at Warner, there were all these other folks on the roster, and they were having hits. And today, if I look at who was on the roster when I signed in, I think, 2011, and who's still on the roster, the only three people still on the roster are me, Brett Eldridge, and Blake Shelton.
Wow.
And I don't have a number one hit yet that I know of. A lot of those folks did, and it speaks to your point, you know, and this really is a marathon, and a hit song is great. It's the golden ticket, you know, but it's a roller coaster ride, and especially if you get that hit and you're not maybe ready for it, or it's not exactly who you are, and then for every show the rest of your life you have to go out and sing that. That's a number on a heart.
And it also seems like that is also testimony. Warner really believes in you. That's why you're on that. And let's go back. I think it's important, and you talk about this as much as you want to, but on site, I've read a little bit about it. That's like do you live out there? It's right outside Nashville,
yeah.
right?
I'm all about talking.
Okay, great.
on-site.
Because I've had
believe,
friends that just rave about their experience there.
Yeah, I believe every adult should go to Graceland, and then every adult should go to on-site.
Wow.
For actually similar reasons. But you go to this beautiful compound way out. It's probably 45 minutes from Nashville, out in the country, and there's a horse pasture and a nature trail, and there's sort of a main house that has some incredible cooking, like really good food, and these cabins where you bunk up with roommates, and you walk, and they have a main building where there's a gathering space and then smaller spaces, and each there's sort of on-site 101 is a thing called Living Center program, and it's I think 6 days maybe. So you walk into the main area, you give them your papers because you fill out a bunch of stuff before you go, and it's 6 months of therapy in a week. You check your phone at the door. You don't see it till you leave. You are only known by your first name, and you are not allowed to talk about what you do for a living. And think about that, like for a guy who has only ever done music since I struck out at T-Ball, it's such a massive part of my identity. I can't talk about gigs. I can't talk about, well, this tour wasn't fair, man. I had to talk about it in terms of the heart and me as a person. And you're grouped with, they figure out all the people who are in your particular session out of maybe 50, and they pair you with into a group of 10 that they feel like is going to be really compatible. And you do big group stuff in the morning, and then you break off into your small group, and each small group has one of the world's greatest mental health professionals kind of walking you through. And what you really do is you spend 6 days reconnecting with your inner child and grabbing them by the hand and saying, hey, buddy, I got you now. I'm not going to let go, because everyone in life gets kicked out of Eden, and it usually happens in childhood. It may be a big trauma, it may be a small trauma, but big and small trauma have the same shape. And the better you can know yourself and know your family of origin, the better you can understand what happened when your younger self got kicked out of Eden. And we need that inner child, especially you and I, because to be creative, that's what kids do better than us. I'm seeing that with my 4-month-old right now. I'm like, dang, Gabe, give me some of that sense of wonder, man. I need that. And so you reconnect with that, and you leave much healthier.
That's fantastic. I love that. Kicked out of Eden. Yeah, I know all of music, writing too. I mean, it is about getting back to that place where you kind of leave all that stuff at the door of being an adult and responsibility, or really, it's just getting away from that so that you can let the other thing happen that was so easy when you were 5, your imagination. And I also think, not to talk too much, but
I love it.
I had a conversation with my wife this morning, and people talk about this, but I think it's important. Social media for kids and these smartphones they're just attached to, like, really cyborgs, really, with these machines, it is killing imagination. So they are spending 0 time with their imagination. And that, I think, for a child is just horrible, that they're not developing their sense of imagination.
Look, a big reason why I can walk onto any stage in front of any audience and stand tall and strut is because I had a Sony Walkman with foam headphones and a cassette of Marty Stewart's This One's Gonna Hurt You. And I would walk into the woods behind my house, pick up the best guitar-shaped stick I could find, close my eyes, and there I was Marty. You're right. And I think, too, the other thing with social media that's so detrimental to us all, but especially those of us in the creative world, is you know, admiration is not equal to love, you know, and we already have a chart system that makes every day in the music industry a cold day in the locker room. And add to that who's getting more likes, who's getting more views. It gets really unhealthy really quickly and can lead one to believe their value is tied to how many people double tap that screen, and that is no way to be. I am who I am because I grew up in the woods, man. You know, and if I was in front of a screen, we were often a family watching the CMA Awards together and talking about it. And commercial breaks, think about that. You know, it's the same with recording. Mm-hmm. Like, one of the best things to me about analog recording is rewind time. You only get 1 or 2 shots, man, and then you're going to have to wait and spin the thing back. And you can't really do that too often or too much because then you're going to wear that tape down. And it's funny working with Jay Joyce on this Sugarcane EP. I mean, he talked about it so much. He had me in the rehearsal room for 2 days with the band before we ever went in the studio. And he was like, man, you never screw up when you're on the late night show. You play a gig and you make a wrong note, but you turn it into something cool because you're in the middle of a show. You're not going to go back and redo it. And analog, whether you're talking recording to tape or ditching the phone for a set number of hours a day, it plugs you back into that presence. Like, man, I got to make this thing count. I
couldn't agree more. And it makes people focus. Like, as soon as you push red, whatever you had down before is gone, right? Yeah. So you better be doing something better than that, or you're going to have a problem.
And the beauty of committing to say, and this happened, and when we cut to Pro Tools, but on this Sugarcane EP on the title track, it's one of my favorite moments in all of these 6 songs. It's at the end of the first chorus, and I play a guitar lick, and it's from singing and playing it live with the band on the floor. I go, woo-doo-doo-boo-boo-boo, and I slide down on the wrong note, but I bend it up, and immediately in my head, and it's funny too, because John Osborne called me. I borrowed an amp from him for that record, and he's like, hey man, you're gonna have so much fun with Jay. It's gonna be great. I just want to tell you now, at some point you're gonna make a mistake and you're gonna want to go back and fix it, but Jay's gonna shut you down. He said, just laugh it off, roll with it, he'll be right. And thank God that John had that conversation, because I might have gotten all, Jay, I gotta fix this. And I've hit the wrong note, and I knew when I hit it, I was like, this is what John was talking about. And sure enough, Jay was like, oh, that's the coolest thing you've played. And it's in there. And not only is it in there, I overdub an acoustic, and the acoustic answers, brrr, and you can hear me laughing because I'm just like, this is cool. So you can commit to the humanity, and, you know, like that that solo might have a wrong note in it, but man, people are sitting next to you on the roller coaster ride of that. They can feel you like chasing this thing through the woods. And yeah, you got scratched by a vine going through the woods chasing this thing, but you ran through the woods. Like, that's exhilarating. And you can't play 50 takes of a guitar solo and get that same thing.
Yeah, and I've noticed a lot of singers, guitar players who do it too on a solo, you know, where they're just looking, you know, if you're producing, you've got to watch a singer because they will go and go and go, and they want every little thing perfect. And very quickly, you've just beat the life right out of it. You know, a great live performance could have sharp notes. It could have little, like you said, it makes it more human. Those are great advice that you're giving people, man. Well, let's move on. And I really appreciate, and I think everyone listening will appreciate you sharing with us about your time. But I do want to lift us up because I'm really excited for you about your EP Sugarcane.
Yeah, so I put out a record in, I think, 2012 or 13 on Warner, my first full length from them called Rubberband.
Right.
Put a second record out 2017 called Beginning of Things. And all that we just talked about, you know, Rubberband is sort of the story of that. It was my first time getting on the 10-lane interstate of the music industry and trying to figure it out. And there was a lot of heartbreak there when it didn't perform commercially like I wanted it to. Made this second record. and had a little bit of help. So still felt the disappointment, but things had moved in my heart. And one thing that had changed was I was dating this girl when Beginning of Things came out. And it was a different kind of tug. And part of it was I'd gotten myself to this place of perspective. And part of it was just her and her 10,000 watt soul that just kind of sucks you into a good place, you know. And album's out that same week. This is 2017, Beginning of Things. That same week, my manager quits management. My publisher fires me, and I owe him 10 copyrights still. And I'm at the Station Inn doing the album release, and I can just tell. I can already feel it. You know, our single, air quotes, was like over 4 minutes with like a 45-second intro. Like, I should have known. And I kind of did. My gut knew. It's like, well, here we go again. And then I look over at Kristen, and I'm like, well, this over here seems to just happen whether I want it to or not, but I somehow still make music. This woman over here is an opportunity to build my life around more than just that. And so I leave that gig at the Station Inn, tell her I love her for the first time, go on the road with Brandy Clark. I'm writing to get out of my deal. I write the first song that ends up on the EP. It's track 2, For the Love. I write it by myself in a fluorescent flickering, stale beer smelling dressing room somewhere in the Carolinas. I don't even think anything of it because I've still got to catch up on my other 9 copyrights. But I'm sitting down with Chris Lacey and I play her what I've been writing. Almost don't play her that song. And she hears it and she flips. She's like, that. More of this, please. Oh my gosh. And don't let George Strait's people hear it because he'll cut it. And something tells me he probably wouldn't have cut it, but hey, whatever. It was great to see that.
He might have.
He might have. You never know. But it was great to see that reaction from Chris. And on a song that A, I'd written by myself, B, I'd written kind of under duress, not even thinking about. But it's a song about reminding myself and reminding ourselves, you know, why we do what we do. And the heart of that song is in the verse about my dad, who made a career as a banker, but was always my dad, the drummer, you know. And my dad in a suit and tie to me isn't as much my dad as when he's sitting behind that drum kit, and that's where we connect. And him saying to me, you know, all of these pieces of wisdom, like, man, you're doing what you love, do that. Like, hey, this girl, hang on to her, hang on to that. Like, that's another song that landed on this EP called Hang On to That I wrote with Jeff Steele and Adam James. And so I started writing more and more personal stuff. I started writing songs to try to get Kristen to laugh or make her think I was sexy. I wasn't thinking about how's this going to play on the charts? How's Chris Lacey going to hear this? I was writing for this woman I love that I'd bought a ring to ask her to marry me and all these things. And so the story of the Sugarcane EP is it catches people up. If people know about me and remember Rubberband, maybe they may not even know I put out a second album with Beginning of Things. But it catches them up where they last probably saw me on tour following Sam Hunt, opening for Kip Moore. Angry, Fist Through This Town me. And then it gets them all the way to the beaches of Costa Rica. I'm on my honeymoon. And that's the other song, Sugarcane, the title track that I wrote by myself. And I actually brought, I don't know how smart this is, so don't take this as advice, but I brought the guitar. I brought a guitar, nylon string guitar on my honeymoon. I only played it for 5 minutes, you know, the whole time. But the music for Sugarcane is what fell out when I did. And on the flight back, I was thinking about our last day there, and we had done this farm tour on a mountainside and rode horses and saw the cows and ate the cheese and saw the chickens, all this. But we cranked out. They let you take this hand crank and crush a strip of sugarcane, and then you drink the sugarcane juice, and they talk about all the things they make with it. And all of that was swirling in my head. On the flight back, I start jotting lyrics down, and then I'm just trying to make Kristen laugh the next couple nights, and this song turns into something. And so to go from Fist Through This Town to Sugarcane, with the thread of truth being that song For the Love. And then all of these little vignettes in between, like Hang On to That talks about our first date and about my first rock concert my dad took me to, you know, the Rolling Stones thing and the Pac-Man table at Mickey's on Gallatin and Half Drunk, which is this story about me telling her I love her outside the station inn, and a song called Believe in Love, which is, in many ways, I think about saying my wedding vows when I sing that song, because it is sort of my statement of, this is why I believe in love. These are the people that raised me, my papa and my mom and dad, and, why I love dogs and good songs and hard work. And I have a healthy relationship with God that could have been a unhealthy relationship with God, because there's a lot of shame sometimes in that upbringing where I grew up. And my mom spared me that, but then here's this woman I love, and here's what I believe is going to happen. But the most important thing we'll ever do is raise babies, and our story will outlive us. So it's my wedding vow in a song, And so little vignettes, and then getting from that dark night of the soul to the hero has slayed the dragon and he's chilling on a beach.
Amazing. And, I hear the story a lot on the podcast when people, different things. Yours is more like a song as a function to describe what's going on in your life. But I think the reason that works is when you're honest about your feelings and your specific life, that resonates with other people, because we're all very much the same on these kind of issues of love and family. And I agree with you 150%. The things that matter are your wife and your children, your family. Careers go up and down. At some point, if we live long enough, you'll be even the biggest star in the business will be an old guy who kids go, "Who's that?" And they'll say, "That's Tim McGraw." And they'll go, "Who?" That's it. That's how it works. Now, if when my funeral happens and people are crying and my children are all there and I had love in my life, that's going to have so much more meaning than anything I could have done in my career. And I think it's great that you say that, because it's so easy to get caught up in your career or trying to make it or all those things,
Absolutely. And as much as, when I share how I got to this place, it's through this not very typical journey of the music business.
Right.
But it applies to anybody. It especially applies, I think about all the people who grew up in a smaller town like I did. And maybe they stayed there, and maybe they went through some crazy stuff, but maybe they got in the car and said, "You know what, I'm gonna move to this city, and I'm gonna start something over for myself, and I'm gonna chase this thing down." And it doesn't matter what that thing is, you're still having that season of waiting tables in a crummy apartment, and all of that applies. You don't have to have this music career side of it. And you're right, man. I'm singing from this place of me as a human being and not what I do. There's a lot less reference, actually, to me being a guitar player. I mean, I remember on Rubberband, like having a conversation with Chris Lacey. There was, I think, a song I wanted to record for the album, but it was like yet another song about, well, I play guitar and I'll sing the song. There's maybe one or two references of that in Sugarcane. I think the only one I can think of is one verse of For the Love. Everything else is people stuff.
It's great, and you have an interesting story, and you are right, it's not the typical story. I think your musicianship sort of launched you into this world quicker than most people get there as an artist. But as part of the course, you may have come in quicker and stronger, but you still had your rocky road that, like you said, when things weren't going, even though you were in a enviable situation, it also goes to show that there's still struggle, and there's still, like you said, success can be as stressful as failure. It really can. But man, I think everyone listening, myself included, is just really excited to sort of see where you develop as an artist and how you where you're going next. And I have a really strong feeling that even though you seem to be transformed as an individual, those things that you originally strive for are going to happen for you. And you're going to be a whole human when they do, just like you said. And I think it's fantastic, man. So I really do.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. I believe it too. And I love being on the scenic route to stardom. And so far, it's way cooler than what I originally planned.
Yeah.
And so I'm all about it.
And also, just to point out for everyone listening, you also have an incredibly positive attitude. You know, life, you know, however you think life is, that's how it is, you know? Yeah. And you have a great attitude, man. Well, everybody listen, go check out Sugarcane. As soon as we get all the tracks. Are all the tracks out now on Spotify and everywhere? All 6?
All 6 are out now, and the goal is to go back in with Jay before the end of the year and do another 6. And I'm so excited for that as well. But meanwhile, it's great to have some stuff out there that's new for everybody who isn't in this sort of inside world. Even if the songs are some of them 4 years old, they're new to the world, so it's fun having them.
Awesome. So we'll all go check out your current state at 6 tracks, expecting more. And what about touring? Do you have anything lined up for that? Can people come out and see you places, or how's that?
You know,
looking?
I have a handful of things on the books. Not a ton right now. It's such a bottleneck.
Yeah.
And where I really feel like I actually, at this point, have the strongest draw in terms of being able to sell tickets is across the pond. And we're still not quite where, you know,
right.
we're out of the woods enough to plan that. But the fun thing that's happening, and this is why I would do what I don't normally do and plug my social media, including TikTok. I'm actually a pretty good TikToker, believe it or not. But what is happening is last weekend I jumped out on the road with Cadillac 3 just to write with the guys.
Oh, great. Yeah.
And I ended up jumping on stage with them every night. And part of this journey, I've got all these buddies, you know, I've backed up or played on records with. And I have a sneaking suspicion I'll make some last minute appearances because I'm on the bus with somebody. And more will come. But I probably won't be touring my own shows heavily until next year. And I'm okay with that too, because 4 to 8 months is a really important stretch for a little kid, and getting to be here for more of that is not a bad thing.
Absolutely. And your wife will very much appreciate you being home during this period when no one's sleeping very much.
Oh yeah. Yeah, man. It's a wild ride, but I wouldn't have it any other way.
Charlie, thank you so much for being on Pitch List, man. I think it's just a great to get to know you. I'm glad that the listeners can get to know you and follow you and what you're doing. So thank you for being on the show. This is Charlie Worsham on Pitch List with Chris Lindsay. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Pitch List, produced in partnership with the American Songwriter Podcast Network. If you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe to us on Apple Podcast or your preferred listening platform. And if you want, feel free to leave us a 5-star rating and review. For exclusive content from this week's guest and more, you can visit our website at pitchlistpodcast.com or follow our social media pages on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. To hear songs written and or recorded by today's guest, check out this week's playlist by finding us on Spotify at Pitch List Podcast. Plus, don't forget to let us know on social media what songwriter, musician, or music business professional you want to hear from next. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.